So we're talking about overall right now where we are in the study, Christ being a superior person. Now remember what Hebrews is doing. And I'll say this enough, you'll get tired of hearing it. But when you get tired of hearing something, that's when you're really starting to learn it. And I really learned that in school. Because I said, okay, I already know that, move on. Well, you know, that's when you're really getting to know it. Because before that, you think you know it, then you forget it. You know, when they start saying it over and over again, it's like a song. When I try to learn a song, is when I can recite that song forwards, backwards, in the middle, and pick it up anywhere and sing it, and I'm tired of listening to it, that's when I'm really starting to know it. And I know that. And that's the way studying the Bible is, okay? I love studying the Bible, and I love doing it this way. And we're going to do sort of a verse by verse. If you have questions, it's time to ask that question as we go through, okay? And I encourage questions, okay? But the book of Hebrews, what the writer is doing, and which I believe to be the Apostle Paul, okay? And we talked about the authorship. And I believe, I don't know how many, I know many of you, how many of you have done any reading at all as far as the authorship of Hebrews? Anybody done any reading in that as far as what your Bibles are saying? Miss Jane, you have. Somebody here had somebody, Brother Mike, who did your Bible say wrote Hebrews? Was it leaning toward Paul? Somebody had a different one. I don't know who that was. Somebody had a. Who?
Well, the bottom line is, it says the theologian Origen wrote, who it was that really wrote the epistle, God only knows.
Okay, he's quoting Origen.
Dave suggested several, there's been several.
Oh, he's quoting Origen.
Yes, sir.
And he's saying, what did Origen say?
Who it was that really wrote the epistle, God only knows.
That's what Origen said. Okay, Origen was the first century. So if he didn't know, and only God knows, and then that's true. Only God does know. But I look at it, try to look at it as simplistic as I can. I don't think God made this hard for us. I think theologians throughout the years have made it simple for us. Most people ascribe the book of Hebrews to Apostle Paul. And like I said, even though Paul was the apostle to the Gentiles, he was still a Jew, and he was a member of the Sanhedrin. He was a Pharisee. He had reached the pinnacle of the Jews' religion. Nobody would have known it in and out like Paul did. And when Paul saw the light, no pun intended, he saw the light literally on the Damascus road. And when he saw the light and said, Lord, what will you have me to do? And then, he turned over and started being an apostle of the Lord instead of being a persecutor of the church. And, he all of a sudden, all of those Old Testament types, all of those Old Testament pictures, all those Old Testament shadows, he realized that all of his upbringing as a Jew, all of those things he learned pointed to a person, Jesus Christ. He realized that. So writing the book of Hebrews, at the beginning, he's telling us this superior person, Christ, is the fulfillment of everything that you know. This is a typically Jewish book, meaning that the audience that it was originally intended for was Jews. It's given to us to teach us the same thing it's teaching the Jews, that Christ is a superior person, and he is and in his majesty, and that's what we've been looking at. Christ is superior in his majesty because he is the Son of God. He is superior in his majesty, above the prophets, above the angels, above everything, because he is the Son of God, the unique, only begotten Son of God. And that's what gives him the superiorness of his majesty. Now, we're getting into chapter 2 of Hebrews, right there, and we want to start there. Now, you see, of course, the language here that he's using, that since Christ is the Son of God. And he's superior to all these things, such as the prophets and the angels. And he has the eternal claim. That's what we looked at last week. That we see now the experience of the sonship of Christ by men. In chapter 2, he talks about, therefore, we ought to give the more earnest heed to the things which we have heard, lest at any time we should let them slip. Because of who he is, because of who he claimed to be, we should give earnest heed to the things which we have heard, lest at any time we let them slip. So Christ is superior in his majesty, because he's the Son of God. Christ is superior in his ministry because he is the Son of Man. Go back up to the last verse of chapter 1. Remember, verse divisions and chapter divisions are not inspired. Don't forget one chapter and sort of end it and say, okay, I'm starting chapter 2, I'm starting something else. Not necessarily. You got to keep the context in mind. Are they not all ministering spirits sent forth to minister for them who shall be heirs of salvation? Who are the heirs of salvation? That's a question. Not us. That's right. We are the heirs of salvation. So, since now Christ is superior because he's the Son of Man and coming to man. So what should we do? Since we're the heirs of salvation, number one, we must appropriate the gospel. In order to be an heir of salvation, you have to appropriate the gospel of Jesus Christ. You can know about the gospel. You can know everything there is about the gospel. You can recognize that Jesus is who he said he was. But if you don't appropriate it to you, it don't mean anything. You know what I mean? You remember the example I gave of going on a trip. Now, y'all use GPS or y'all just went. Y'all didn't care where you went, did you? And, but, used to, back when we had maps, paper maps, you say, okay, I'm going to go on a trip, and you're going to get this map, and you're going to mark your trip. I remember seeing maps of old people having maps. They would take a highlighter and highlight highlight the path that they were going to take, the roads they were going to take. And that way they didn't have to do it on the fly on the road. Okay? Well, if I could study about that trip all I want, okay, we're going to go here, we're going to take this road, we're going to go here, it's going to take us this long to get from here to here approximately. We're going to stay the night here, we're going to go see this, and we can plan that trip out, right? We can know that trip. We can know where we're going, how we're going to get there, how long it's going to take to get there, and what we're going to do along the way. We can know all that, right? And then we go put the map back in the cabinet and go sit down in the chair and say, boy, that was a good trip. Didn't go on a trip, did you? You talked about it, though, didn't you? You know about it, though, don't you? You know about how much it's going to cost you. Okay, I have to fill out a car here and all that kind of stuff. You know all about the trip. Until you appropriate it, it doesn't mean anything. Until you get in the car and turn the car on and start rolling that car and going down the road that you've planned, it doesn't mean it's the same way of salvation. I'm afraid of what's happening here in the South and the United States primarily is this, and I think it happens everywhere, but I think primarily here because we have so many distractions. We have people here because of the past revivals. I mean, let's face it, at one time, America was sort of halfway, sort of religious. Y'all remember? I still remember the time. I came up in the transition time. I came up in the best time, and I guess you can say the best. These were the best of times and the worst of times, I guess you could probably say. Because I remember back when I was a kid, you better get what you wanted on Saturday because Sunday you wasn't buying nothing. You hear me? You wasn't going to a restaurant, and if your car was out of gas, then you're going to have to push it Monday because you ain't getting no gas on Sunday. And, well, that's unique to Tallahassee because of the mill town. But that wasn't the way it was where I was. But Sundays, everything was shut down. everything. I mean, why? Everybody went to church. For the most part, everybody went to church. And so as that's a big push, people had the remembrance. You know, I keep talking about the remembrance of God. And you got a lot of people after that really starting around my mother's generation. And that'll be the baby boomer generation. The baby boomer generation, they were taken to church. They went to church. They knew a lot about church. But it was in that era right there is where they really started when they got into adulthood, quit going to church. And I don't know if a lot of them, they knew about God. They knew of God because they were sitting there. They heard it. They had to go to revivals because that's what you did. You know, when a community had a revival, like where my mother lived, the 2 stores that were there, they shut down. Everybody shut down. We're going to church. And they knew about it. But the question is, did they appropriate it to their life? I can know about faith, know about God, know about heaven, know about hell, know about what the degrees are. But if I don't take the trip myself and accept it, appropriate it, I'm just as lost even though I know about it. And I'm afraid that's where a lot of people are. Here it is. Y'all ready for this? This is one of these good statements. Write it down because somebody needs to keep up with these things for me. I'm thinking of a word. I got the statement. I'm just thinking of one word, so I put it in my statement, okay? They confuse biblical knowledge with a spiritual experience. How y'all like that one? I have the knowledge. If I have the knowledge, I must be okay. Yes. Mm-hmm.
I was under the impression that had to do with the Jewish community because there was a lot of places. I mean, I didn't grow up in Tallahassee, but there were lots of places that did that they shut down on Wednesday afternoons. And I was under the impression it was a Jewish thing. So my thought is that Jewish people are doing the same. I mean, they're slacking too.
Oh yeah, no doubt. They confuse their heritage with experience, with spiritual experience. But I'm a Jew, I'm okay. But people who were raised in the South primarily, I got all this knowledge. My grandmama and granddaddy built that church. Therefore, I'm okay. And now I don't know if that was a Jewish thing or not. I don't know what it would have to do with Jewish. I don't know. My understanding in Tallahassee, particularly based on what I've heard, now those of you that have been here all your life know more about it than me, but based on what I've heard is because everything's shut down in Tallahassee on Wednesday, so you can go to church on Wednesday. It was primarily a church thing.
Montgomery was after 12.
Well, that's the way it is here. It's 12 o'clock here because you still have businesses that close at 12 o'clock here. Not all of them, most of them don't. But there's still your older ones that are owned by local people, they still close down at 12 o'clock. Sure do. But I thought that was more or less go to church that day, but I don't know. That's what, you say Montgomery did it. And at 12 o'clock. That's interesting.
I don't remember exactly what it was.
I'm trying to think what the Jews would have to do with Wednesday, particularly. I don't know.
I don't remember what they did at Selma.
But I know
We had
the only time in North Carolina,
at 1 o'clock on Sunday.
the only time in North Carolina when people, everybody would close down and go to church. The only time people didn't go to church in North Carolina, or it's not that they didn't go to church, they would change church. And that was when the crops came in. When the crops came in the farming communities, they would change church a lot, but they still went.
Businesses that were owned by Jews in Montgomery also.
Yeah, that could be.
I don't know, that might have been where I got that from.
Yeah.
Well, the doctor's offices and the dentist offices all were open on Wednesday afternoons, and they were full. So I was always under the impression that that was not a religious thing necessarily, but where the convenience of saying, hey, if we're gonna be open on Saturday, that was your 40 hours, usually half a day on Saturday, and that would get you your 40 hours a week.
That's
And
right.
then that would be,
Okay.
and then you would have that half day on Wednesday to go to the doctor, dentist
Okay.
and whatnot.
Okay.
It's to keep from having to work full 6 days.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
I remember it very well, lunchtime closing on Wednesdays like everybody else. But for the majority of this town, they closed on Wednesdays so they could go up and play golf on the hill up here on Wednesday afternoon, including everybody, the own store owners and everybody else.
Yeah.
That's where you.
That was their day to play.
That's where you find them, right up on that hill on Wednesday afternoon playing golf.
And it could have been a legalistic thing as well, because, you know, they were saying, hey, you could move half a day if it was a Sabbath for the Jewish, if it was a Sabbath on Saturday, if you're only gonna work half a day, you know, we take a day, half the other half here, and it, you know.
That could have been in that situation there where they only worked a half a day on Saturday, so they could go to the synagogue on Saturday and wouldn't have missed it instead of working all day. That might have been, it's interesting. I don't know though.
I did business with some Jews in New York, and this is recently, and they closed on half a day Friday to get ready for Saturday.
For Saturday.
And on Sunday, they're full blown going.
Oh yeah.
But nothing ever happened on Wednesday.
Huh, I don't know.
And they're as orthodox as they can be.
Yeah. It's just, it's interesting. It probably had different reasons. I would stand to reason when you had a community who worked long days or whatever days, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, half a day Saturday, when would you go to the doctor? That or dentist, you know, take off half a day, go that day. Maybe that was what that was. That makes sense.
I remember also that the church had so much pull back in the days that you're talking about,
Yeah.
that everybody looked more to the church than they did the government.
Yeah.
The church ran the rules of the town.
Well, it wasn't so much they ran it, is that the people in the town took the church in consideration when they made them. That's the difference. Is now, you know, and typically, I don't know if you've heard me before say that I remember a time when they're on town councils and all that, they used to always put a preacher on it because of the fact is to keep that spiritual, you know, focus and on in the community. But now I can assure you right now, church has no pull in the community, zero. They do not care what the church has going on. I mean, if you don't believe it, go down here and look at the school. They practice and play on Wednesday just like they do any other time. They don't care. And they tell the students, if you ain't out there, you don't play. And it used to never be that way. And but the church don't have that pull anymore. But you're right, Brother Mike. It used to have a lot of pull because people who were the high-to-dos were all involved in church.
I always heard discussions of what you could do and you couldn't do because of the church or with the
Yeah.
church influence.
Yeah. Now the church don't even come into question when people making any plans.
When I was a kid, we'd be walking down the street, cutting up, carrying on. When we came to church, we all got quiet until we passed the church, and we started cutting up again.
The reverence
Because we were
yeah.
taught to have reverence for the church,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
and we were a bunch of heathens.
Well, my mother used to tell me things about in her childhood. They would run around and, you know, do the things teenagers would do back in those days, like teenagers do today. And they go out and they'd throw everything out the car so nobody catch anything in the car, but they never would throw it into a church. That wasn't what you did. And she said when she remembered one time they did that, they went by and threw it in the church and realized they turned around and went back and cleaned the whole yard up that was in the church because they were scared for the fact of throwing it in the church. But now I pick up a 5-gallon bucket of trash out here every week. And they don't care. And they'll break in a church just as quick as they will anywhere else. Have we seen that, right? But a lot of people have the knowledge. Here's the thing, and I think that's a good statement. You might want to put this down. Many confuse biblical knowledge with spiritual experience. And they say, well, just because I know God, know about God, that must mean I'm okay with God. That's not necessarily the truth. Okay? And isn't that what Jesus told the Jews? And he said this in Isaiah, repeated it in Matthew, where he says, they speak highly of me with their mouth, but their heart's far from me. Isn't that the definition of that? They know it, so therefore they speak it, but they never appropriate it to their heart and make it meaningful. Appropriating the gospel is paying heed to it and doing what it says. I mean, it's possible to slip from the truth. If it wasn't possible to slip from the truth, he wouldn't have told us to give more earnest heed to the things that we've heard, lest at any time we should let them slip. Any time. We have an adversary, an enemy out there, and that word slip doesn't mean that we just walk away from it all of a sudden. It's a drift away. It's like it's given the idea of a river, and this is the connotation of the word, the Greek word. It's the connotation of a river, and there's like a piece of driftwood in it, and it's just flowing by. It's not speed. It's not all at once. It's just meandering by. And that's the way that it is. I can go back and tell people, I can go back and show people the air. I've seen it so many times. Most of the time, people that are in church, when they let the truth slip and they get out of church, they just don't quit all at one time. Those were coming Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, involved in everything. Then all of a sudden, what you notice, they stop coming to extra things in the church. That's what happens first. Secondly, Wednesday night gets a little more tough to attend. Yeah. Third, then all of a sudden, they sort of hit and skip on Sunday night. Then all of a sudden, they miss a Sunday or two. Then next thing you know, where'd they go? See, they let it drift right on by. Satan knows not to turn the switch on full blast all of a sudden.
Well, that's the same way with a drug addict. They might smoke marijuana, but he doesn't tell them to go shoot heroin first thing. He gradually works them into it.
And a lot of times you're right. And so he goes on, and verse 2. And enticement. And for if the word spoken by the angels was steadfast, he's back on the angels again. He says, and every transgression and disobedience received a just recompense of reward. How shall we escape if we neglect so great a salvation? He's still talking about those men who are on the heirs of salvation. So go back to verse 2. For if the word spoken by the angels was steadfast, and every transgression and disobedience received a recompense or reward. Going back to the law of Moses, when the Jews sinned, retribution came. Sometimes that retribution was swift. Sometimes that retribution slumbered. But it always came. And there's another thing. We're in the day, what age we live in now? The age of what? Grace. And you know, Israel had all kinds of types, all kinds of shadows, all kinds of illustrations, all kinds of pictures of salvation. And they were still held accountable. If they had pictures and shadows and types of, and here it is, we have what? The real thing. We have Jesus, the superior person. If they didn't escape, How shall we escape? You see what the writer's saying? If God is going to hold the Jews responsible for they didn't pick up the illustration, then why wouldn't God even more so hold us accountable if we don't pay attention and pay heed to the direct gospel that we have from these people that saw and ate and spoke and walked with Jesus, right? How shall we escape if we neglect so great a salvation? So the answer to that question is, we're not going to escape. There's no escaping to that. That's the answer to that. It's like this. You take somebody that's sick. You go to the doctor. The doctor says, okay, this is what you've got. This is how to fix it. You go back to the house and you say, I don't like that doctor. I don't believe that doctor. I'm not going to pay a heed to that doctor. I'm not going to do anything that doctor tells me to do because I think that doctor's a quack. So you don't do anything and then you end up dying. And then, maybe somewhere somebody asked the question, well, why did he die? Is it the doctor's fault that he died? No, the doctor told him what to do. But he didn't pay heed to it. We're sick with sin. We were told we are on a head-on collision with hell when we come into this world. And God told us in the Word of God how to fix it, what to do. If we don't do it, then we're not going to escape. That's basically what he's saying there in verse 3. Put it this way, to neglect remedy is as serious as deliberately rejecting it. And that's what you're doing. People say, how many times have you talked to somebody, especially in the South, and I say this in the South, I've been in the South all my life, not so true out west and up north, but it's true in the South, and you say, you go up, how many times have you ever been told, well, I haven't accepted, but neither have I rejected? You ever been told that? Well, I just hadn't made a decision yet. I haven't rejected it, I'm still thinking, but I haven't accepted it. What did Jesus say about that? He that believeth is not condemned, but he that believeth not is condemned already. So neglecting the remedy is just as serious as deliberately rejecting it. Saying, I don't want it. But we got people out there that do it, he just, you're in denial, I guess. Maybe, is it plausible deniability? Is that maybe what we're looking at? Plausible deniability. Not only should we appropriate the gospel, but secondly, appreciate the gospel. At the end of verse 3, it talks about, and was confirmed unto us by them that heard him. We ought to appreciate the fact that we have confirmation of the gospel and appreciate the fact how it was conveyed to us, not only by the prophets and the angels of the Old Testament, but what did the first chapter of Hebrews say? But in these last days he has spoken to us by whom? His Son. Right? All Old Testament teaching revitalized by Jesus Christ. He didn't come to destroy it. He came to fulfill it. All New Testament teaching was revealed by Jesus. He didn't do away with the Old Testament. He fulfilled the Old Testament. That is a misnomer among some Baptists who say, well, the Old Testament doesn't apply to us. Well, no, the Old Testament is given to us as examples. But what? We ought to take those, and they're just as important to us as examples as they are if they were writing to us. When Jesus died on the cross, he took the handwriting of ordinances that were against us and nailed it to his cross. Meaning the fact that what? He took all of those things, nailed it to his cross. The the rituals, all of those things he did away with. Why did the rituals stop? Why did the sacrifices and all of those things stop? Because Christ fulfilled them. Right? He fulfilled them. So the moral part of the law was restated in the New Testament. That's the reason we can go back to the Old Testament and pick up the morality of the law, because Jesus kept and taught the morality of the law, but not the ceremonial part of the law. But because Christ fulfilled all of the ceremonial part of the law, all of the temple rituals, all of the feasts, all of the wear that the priest wore, all of the everything, Christ fulfilled them to a T. So in Christ, we don't need all of those things anymore. It's like Pentecost. You've got some of our brothers and sisters out there that say, boy, this right here is the way it was at Pentecost. Well, that was good, but we're not at Pentecost anymore. And I give the illustration like this. When you're going to go build a building, what do? You have a groundbreaking ceremony, don't you? You get some kind of piece of equipment, you get the gold hats, you get the fake shovels, you get everybody out here with a camera out here and say, okay, click, 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 click. We all took a picture, then everybody leaves. Monday morning, I'm just using it as a thing, all the workers show up and they say, hold up. Where are the gold hats and the gold shovels? Where's all the people in the suits? Where are the TV cameras? It ain't time for the groundbreaking ceremony. That's all with. It's time to get to work. That's where we are. We're in the building. We're building a church. That's what we did. Christ is building a church through us. The groundbreaking ceremony was Pentecost. Don't go back and try to do the groundbreaking again. You got one. All those Old Testament things, Christ fulfilled. Now it's time to get to work. Time to appropriate what he taught us now. That's the difference, okay? A lot of people get it confused, but that's the difference. We'll pick up there next week, okay? Read.